you're Mr. Rick Quinn, and you reached out to me on Twitter because I put out a post and stuff. But actually, I'm excited to talk to you because I bought the negatives on, I think, Kickstarter
Oh,
like
cool.
forever ago. Yeah. So
Oh,
I knew
nice.
your name whenever you reached out to me, but I wasn't super familiar because I hadn't read the negatives since like way back when I got it, you know.
Well,
Um,
thank you for backing it.
yeah, yeah. And so you sent me a link with kind of like, I'm not going to say everything you've done, but quite an extensive list. And I actually did go through and read, I think, all of them except for one. Because, yeah, so I think I only missed one. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about like what you're doing and what your stories are about and see what your process is and what it is that, you know, how you craft these stories, you know, because I found something really interesting in them, and so I wanted to talk to you. But I guess let you introduce yourself and what kind of things you do.
Sure. Well, yeah. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me and have me on your show. My name is Rick Quinn, and yeah, I write primarily independent comics, mostly kind of like short stories or kind of like kind of one shots. And yeah, been doing that for the past couple of years. And in addition to that, I mean, like I've always been a writer and done art and dabbled in like film and music. So just kind of like generally try and be creative and however I can. And but yeah, the focus the last few years has been kind of primarily on doing like, yeah, independent comics.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, you said you do independent comics, and I'm really impressed with your team here on all of these. Like, there's so many great names in here. Milton Lawson, he's got a great book out right now. He's down here in Houston. I've talked to him a few times. He's a cool guy, and you had him on there, and who does a lot of your lettering. He did the panel. Is it Panel X Panel? Back they had the thought bubble thing not too long ago.
Yeah, so the stories, so I do stories under this kind of umbrella anthology title called Uncanny Valley, and so far the two stories that we've done for that, the lettering has been done by Hassan Otsman Elhau,
There you go.
and yeah, I've worked with him. Worked with Adita Bidikar, did the lettering on a short
Mm-hmm.
of mine called The Dead Sparrow. And then on the rest of the books, the lettering is just done by me, so it's
Yeah.
you know it's pretty serviceable. But yeah, Milton, yeah, I mean, you know, Milton is like you said, from Houston, and we've been friends now for several years, and yeah, he's great. And yeah, Thompson Heller, his book that just came out, they did
Mm-hmm.
with our another one of our friends, Dave Chisholm, is great, and I'm really excited that that's coming out because he's been, you know, I've kind of followed the path of that book along, and so it's kind of neat to you know see it actually in stores now. But yeah.
Yeah. I really like Dave. I know he did Chasing the Bird, which is like a Charlie Parker story. I know nothing about it, but that's how powerful just the cover and stuff is that I can remember who it's about and what the title is, you know. And I saw him on another book too. So he's another one that I've been watching that I see his name popping up more and more. I think he's going to start doing some really big things too, you know.
I mean, I mean, he certainly deserves to. I mean, yeah, the guy is. I mean, I'm biased because, again, like I said, we're kind of friends. But yeah, I think he's pretty incredible. I mean, especially considering that he's also. I mean, he does the art. He also writes them, and he's also, you know, a musician and does soundtracks for his comics. And I mean, I have a page of his from his sci-fi book that came out this year, Canopus.
There we go.
Yeah, if you haven't checked that out, I would highly recommend that. And Chasing the Bird, I mean, that is like the definition of like a must buy immediately. Like it's incredible. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that we've kind of talked about your supporting cast that is like amazing up and comers, which just speaks to your own quality. Um, do you have like a theme or like I guess like a central thesis that you tend to follow on your stories? Is there something that pulls them all together?
That's a good question. Feels like there should be.
Well, let me follow that up because I do have a little bit of a point here. I recently found out there's an open opportunity to write like a short story for this contest, you know, and so I'm kind of interested in that. And it's called "Producing the End of the World," and so your short story theme has to be dealing with you know, with the end of the world, the apocalypse, the story at the end, everything has to be destroyed, you know. And so your story is basically gonna take place leading up to that. And what they want you to explore there is the human condition, which I thought was really weird that that just came up because reading your stories, that's what really blew me away is that every one of your stories is probably the most simple problem that you could imagine, but it always like kind of comes back to just like human nature, you know, like we overlook it, we don't ever think about it, you know. And you know, so I thought that was really interesting is like you seem to deal in like these very like simple problems that we face as humans, you know. And I thought that's kind of like what a lot of your stories came down to was like it was the simple solution that we were never seeing. Like the one where the guy in the nuclear blast, like all he wants is to be with his wife and he lost her, you know, and so he kind of does, you know, it's like that simple. He just gets to his wife and it's the human nature of love and love lost, you know, that he's really chasing there. So I don't know, is that something you focus on is like trying to write about just like basic human emotions?
I mean, I think any kind of writing that you do or anything creative you do is going to touch on like, yeah, human emotions. I mean, I think your observation is kind of interesting because I do think, yeah, and this is probably a subconscious effort if it comes across, but I do think that with so many kind of like problems or conflicts in the world and that people have, usually the solution is pretty simple. Usually the solution isn't really that difficult, and the things that kind of get in our way or between us and the thing that will, you know, make life better is usually kind of a simple thing, but we tend to overcomplicate everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's and you know, I think there's a lot that goes into that, but I mean, I think that, you know, kind of the older you get, the more these kind of like artificial barriers kind of present themselves, and you know, you kind of lose sight of like kind of when you really boil everything down to its essentials, like how simple things really should be, you know.
Yeah.
And so and I mean that is something that I think I just kind of struggle with in my you know my normal life or like my job and or
Mm-hmm.
you know, just like the world in general. You just think like, God, this like should not be this hard. uh,
Yeah.
uh, and again, it's like these things that are sometimes out of your control, or sometimes they're just kind of these like you know, these illusions that
Mm-hmm.
um, keep you from realizing like, oh well, actually like the answer to this is simple, like. And yeah,
Yeah.
but that isn't a conscious, it isn't a conscious, I don't know, it's kind of hard to
Well,
say. A
and
lot of
let me
times,
ask you, like, this is probably what you were about to say, but like, where does a story start for you? Is it like the idea of one thing and trying to build out from there to fill the story, or is there like some kind of concept you're trying to write about, or I guess like how do you find the story? Because like they're all different and unique, but they always come down to like these very like streamlined human emotions, like our love or fear, you know, that's another one that seems to pop up a lot.
yeah, So the stories usually don't start with a theme. They don't usually start with, okay, this one's going to be about love or fear. Usually, I mean, they're all kind of different, but usually it starts with maybe an image, or sometimes it's a song. I'll hear a song, and either the mood of the song, or sometimes like the song will kind of evoke images, and then it's kind of, you work backwards from that. You say, okay, well, I have this image, but it doesn't have any context. So what would the story be around this image? And you kind of like, everything kind of works backwards from that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a theme. Sometimes it's like a prompt. I mean, I did a book called Saltwater with the artist Dana Obera, and that we had worked on a short piece before, and after I asked, do you want to work on something else, or like, what do you want to do next? And he mentioned, I want to do something sci-fi and kind of like in the vein of like the original Star Wars. I was like, okay. And like, based off that premise, I was like, kind of like, okay, well, what do I do with that? And then at the time I was working at a used bookstore, and one morning I go to work and processing orders, and I see this book, and the book, I can't remember if it was on the cover or on the back, but it just had this phrase talking about the anarchy of water. And just immediately I was like, okay, this is the I don't know what that means really, the anarchy of water, but it sounds cool. And that's going to be this is the starting point. And from that, the sci-fi Star Wars premise, reading the anarchy of water, led to, our book, which eventually, has this kind of like political subtext to it. And, so that's how that one came about.
That was a really cool one, because I never would have guessed like Star Wars was, not that it wasn't an influence, but that it was a starting point, because it felt so grounded. There was like architectural design, and like the vehicle that she rides, I forget what they kept calling it, but like they were very like Star Wars, like starship kind of looking stuff, but other than that, the story felt so much different from anything Star Wars. I never really connected the two.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars original, if you look at it in its original context, I mean, it was George Lucas before he made Star Wars wanted to direct Apocalypse Now, which, when you think of that, like, sounds insane. Like, that would have been horrible. And he was going to do it as like a kind of like cinema verite, like documentary kind of style. Yeah. But then instead he went and did Star Wars. But it's like Star Wars, we watch it now and it's like, oh yeah, it's fun. It's, Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan. But in the context of what is made, is like Lucas's original intention was like, well, this is like a Vietnam, partly, not entirely, but like partly, like, this is a Vietnam War parallel. And the empire is America. So it was like, it had this like political subtext that at the time was probably much more apparent than it is now. And so, I mean, that's kind of where I took it, like the inspiration of Star Wars being like this story of like rebellion and rebelling against the empire. That's what, when I was a kid, I mean, that's what I responded to the most in Star Wars. I loved the idea of like, the scrappy underdogs fighting against this like totalitarian, like fascist empire. And so in the comic Saltwater, I mean, the kind of like modern parallels, it's very much about like kind of inequality, and you have like the people that live in kind of opulence, and then people that live in, essentially like slums, and kind of that the politics of that is kind of akin, at least in my mind, to kind of how like Star Wars kind of took its politics at the time and kind of fashioned the story of like a rebellious uprising.
Yeah, and that's what was really cool about it. Like, I think whenever they fly away from the planet and they refer to it as like a planet of water, I kind of like took Star Wars in that moment, but that was probably the first time I thought it through the whole thing. But as you talk about it, yeah, it really, it's almost, it's almost like Star Wars Episode 7, like done right, you know? Like your character kind of reminds me of what they thought that Daisy Ridley's character was supposed to be, where she was like a scrappy underdog that like was kind of like this orphan, you know? I never felt that way about Luke Skywalker because I don't know, just the way he left his aunt and uncle and everything didn't feel the same as the way that they introduced Daisy Ridley's character, and that's what this one felt like. Like she was real scrappy and real tough and real clever, and it was really cool. But it built a world the way that you divided everything, and I thought that was really cool. Like, is there more to this out there somewhere that you're putting together, or was this like the whole package, you know? Because it felt like there could be more to this world. Like you had really built something there.
So far, there isn't more to it. I mean, and unfortunately, with a lot of these a lot of these projects, so much of it is kind of dictated by, you know, economics and time, and like, you know, it's, but they're kind of, a lot of them are, hopefully my general intention is to kind of build like, you know, a self-contained story with beginning, middle, and end that you can pick up, not need to know anything beforehand, read and enjoy, and then you can set it down. But then like with an open possibility of like, well, there's more stories that you could possibly tell kind of in this world. But you know, as you know, as somebody who like you know, finances all my own projects and is doing like all the promotional work and all of that, it's like, well, unless a publisher or somebody with the resources to do it came along and said, hey, we'd love to publish more of this story, it isn't incredibly viable, you know, at the moment. And I mean, you know, with those limited resources, I tend to favor kind of, you know, getting to the next project. I like to kind of try and do new and different things. And so if you kind of like put all of your resources on that one story, I mean, I could possibly have 5 or 6 Saltwater stories, but then I wouldn't have like the others, you know, these other stories.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, you know, there are probably positives and negatives to both approaches there. But
yeah, I know what you're saying, because I don't know if you're a fan of Kirkman or Firepower, but I don't know if it was the first issue or the Free Comic Book Day issue of Firepower, and where the letters page was going to go, you know, he was talking about that, and he was saying like, I like new things. He was like, we all do. Like that's why we keep moving on and moving on, and so that's part of what Firepower was like he was just at this point where he felt like everything he was doing was all stuff he's been doing, you know, and so he wanted something new, you know, and I feel that like I like the idea of just like these small like contained stories, and I think it's really cool. And if that's all it ever is, like the fact that you built a world that I can imagine that nobody else can see is fine by me, you know. But what would happen if like you know, a publisher, or if like there became a lot of interest in it, it might be worth, you know, building out that world more if that's what the market was looking for, I guess, you know?
Yeah. And you know, part of it too is, you know, I still like I said, I've been writing, you know, essentially like my whole life, for as long as makes sense. But I still very much see myself as like a beginner, and like, you know, somebody who's still learning the craft. And so I think, switching it up and working on these different projects, I mean, it just like it helps you expand your creativity. And I mean, also like, you know, a lot of these, almost all these projects, I mean, it always comes with research that you want to do, books you want to read, and movies that you want to watch. And so like all of that is just like more kind of, you know, like fuel for more creative ideas. And yeah, I mean, I can relate to the sentiment of like not wanting to be you know, stuck doing
Yeah.
Walking Dead for however many hundreds of issues, you know, yeah, I'm sure at some point he was just like, I just, you know, I'm over this.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
plus too, I mean, like, you know, it can afford you the ability to like work with a lot of different artists as well, and like, um,
Really
and that,
find yourself and your style.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, all of that. So
Yeah. That's cool, man. Another thing that pops up in your writing a lot, and we kind of talked about it earlier, but music and audio, you know, which is probably kind of odd to some people because that's the one thing that's lacking in comics is you don't really have like audio and sound built into the medium. You know, that has to be user generated. You know,
mhm.
but you do a lot with sound and music. You know, it played a part in the nuclear survivor's story, finding his wife and stuff when he played the piano. Earworm is completely based around whistling. Um, and I felt like there was one more story that I read in here that kind of dealt with sound quite a bit. So, what's your inspiration there? I mean, I know you like music, but at what point did you decide there's a way to do it in comics and have sound in comics?
I'm not sure that I figured out how it works. It's just like it has to. So, you know, it has to work. So, um, yeah, I mean, like I was mentioning earlier, I mean, so many of my ideas kind of come from listening to music. I find music, you know, incredibly evocative of
Hmm.
images and ideas, and yeah, I mean, and I think that it can be kind of an interesting challenge as well. The kind of your, you know, your notion of, well, there's no sound in a comic, so, well, can I get the reader to actually consciously think of the sound? When I read comics, like I don't hear sound very rarely, and I mean, and when I do, like it definitely stands out to me. I'm like, wow, I actually imagine the sound of what is happening here, um, and you know, find that like, you know,
Hmm.
that's impressive if somebody can do that. And
Yeah.
so I like that challenge, and I mean, you know, it's like um, you know, I love to read. You know, I like read a lot of books, and like books have no pictures, so it's like you're one step even further removed from comics. It's like not only do you not have sound, you also don't have pictures now. So, you know, when you're reading, like, you know, the novelist, um, they have to, you know, the sound is the least of their concern. Like the first thing you have to do is be able to like picture what's happening and kind of
Yeah.
follow along, especially the more, you know, abstract and you know, like science fiction and fantasy, like they have to invent um, you know, everything out of words, whereas, you know, like a comic book scriptwriter can say, you know, you know, a few sentences, and then the artist will turn around and have to basically kind of create all the detail. um,
Hmm.
but you know, it's like you know, I guess in one way you can like, I was like, well, I've got an easier job than a novelist. I only have to get the sound on the page. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I just think that there's a lot of parallels too. I mean, like I think like comics have a musicality to them, um, and kind of like a rhythm. You know, if you think of like how
Hmm.
many panels are on a page, and kind of how the story kind of ebbs and flows. You know, that when I'm plotting a lot of these books, I mean, that's one of the things. You know, you're kind of like looking, you're seeing, okay, well, where, you know, where is it kind of calm, and then where is it, you know, the
Hmm.
crescendo, or what, you know, whatever the term is. And so I just see a lot of parallels between the two. And I also find, you know, it's like a lot of times if I'm writing, I want to listen to music, but you can't, you know, you can't have something with lyrics usually because it would kind of be distracting. So a lot of times, like I kind of like to find the music first, so then it's kind of like an excuse to listen to it. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to listen to music, and while I'm listening to music, I'll also write. You know, so it's like the listening part is the goal, and then the writing's just kind of there as an excuse to give me to sit down for a few hours and just listen to, you know, some music. So
yeah, well, let me ask you, in Earworm specifically, like there's this tune that they're kind of like humming and whistling, and they hear it in the music, and then they're able to see it. At what point did you know what the visual representation was so that you could kind of follow that trail with the story and the writing and kind of lay all that out? Did you have to define that, or was that artist generated?
That's kind of an interesting story. So the genesis of that particular story, Earworm, came from, I follow this account on Twitter. I don't think that he's on there anymore. He kind of like deactivates his account every once in a while, but it's at Honorapolis. It's like dream, which means Dream City. This guy named Darren Anderson, who is a really amazing writer. He's written a few books, and he's just kind of like one of these people that just like has, you know, infinite knowledge seemingly about a wide variety of like architecture, music, art, all kinds of like interesting things. So his Twitter account was just like really fascinating collection of stuff that I had no idea about. So
like an eclectic mix of life.
Yeah. So he would post things all the time, and I would like save them or go like look it up on Wikipedia, and like, you know, he's super smart person. And this like one time he posted this video, and it was, I forget who created it or what, but it was like basically this app that could record sound as a 3-dimensional object in space. So they show like a person talking, and then the camera kind of catches as like the sound leaves from their mouth. You could kind of see it in the air and kind of like rotate around in a 3-dimensional space and see this like basically like a waveform floating in the floating in the air. And I was just like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, and then somehow that's what gave me the idea of like, well, what if you had this on a comic page? You could have like this piece of music or a sound that's literally kind of worming its way around. And then when I thought worming around, I thought, well, an earworm, it's like the song that can't get out of your head. And then, well, what do you do with that? And that's kind of how you get on you know, then that's how you kind of get that story. And then as far as like the visualization, it was partly that video, sending that video to the artist Martin Lorbecki, and then partly Martin at the time, but still now and always, like obsessed with Annihilation and like that whole like actually the area, I think, yeah, Area X trilogy, the Jeff Vandermeer. And so he kind of took, at the time, he was like doing a lot of pieces that were kind of inspired by that movie, with that kind of like swampy, like sickly green and purple kind of like, it almost looks like the page is kind of like oozing.
Yeah.
And so he kind of like took that and melded the two ideas together to give you that kind of like, you know, hopefully,
yeah, like slimy green.
yeah, creepy.
Almost like, yeah, it goes almost from like a nuclear green to like a swamp green or something, like real dark and like weird looking.
Yeah. Yeah. Dark and weird looking. That we'll use that quote on our that'll be our full quote for the next one.
Yeah, and that was a really cool one because I guess that's something else that I see a lot is like you do like sci-fi and kind of like future takes and stuff like that a lot too. So is that something that influences you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a huge science fiction fan, science fiction and fantasy. I mean, when I was a kid, I did a lot of like kind of I would do like a lot of like superhero type comics, and then when I was like a teenager and kind of my early 20s, I was very much into, at the time I was doing a lot of like screenwriting and doing filmmaking kind of things, and I was, you know, trying to kind of emulate my heroes in those fields. And you know, I think like a lot of people when they're younger, you don't really have your own kind of writing voice yet, or your artistic voice. So you try and emulate the people you look up to. And so I was trying to write these like, you know, slice of life, you know, stories of people who have had all this like drama and conflict in their lives. And I was like, well, the problem is I have no idea what I'm talking about. Literally nothing has happened to me.
Trying to write about experiences you haven't had is very difficult.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And so I actually, so like, when I remember very, very clearly, like going on a hike. This was in Oregon State, and kind of walking and thinking about, you know, just like I was having all kinds of issues with what I was writing and what I was just doing in my life in general, as far as like being a creative person. And it just kind of struck me, you know, I was kind of like, you know, everything that I'm doing too is all based on like, well, I don't have the money to do this, or like this will never happen. And I just kind of thought to myself, you know, I'm just going to write something just purely for myself, and that's purely for fun. And so like, what would that be? And immediately started writing like basically like a science fiction story, very kind of based in like the Star Trek kind of universe. And so that, because, you know, that's like one of my like very close to my heart, like, you know, kind of series and franchises. So, and, you know, really from like that point on, that was, as I was writing it, I was just like, oh, well, okay, this is different because this is actually fun. And I actually feel like I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit. And I think it ended up, yeah, and I think it ended up, you know, kind of working out because, you know, now that enough time has passed from that point to now, where it's like, well, now I have the best of both worlds, which is a Star Trek episode, great Star Trek episode. I have the best of both worlds, which is the science fiction and the fantasy, but now I do have, you know, a life that I can draw from, a life of experience and you know, not just conflict and pain, but friendship and all those other things. And so now I can take the two and hopefully kind of put them together and, you know, have something worth saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most interesting aspect of even Star Trek is like how those life experiences shape the way that the characters interact that they're meeting. You know, they're going to all these planets and meeting aliens, you know, and reducing it back down to like, well, we all have basic emotions, you know, we all relate. I think that's like the best part, you know, it's universal, you know, everybody has these emotions.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love like specifically like Next Generation, Captain Picard, like that's my shit.
See, I never got like really deep into Star Trek, but my dad, who is about as like character of Texas as you could imagine, I grew up like he watched Star Trek like it was religion. He loved it. It's so weird.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, that was, you know, my dad was a huge Star Trek person, and he loves to tell stories of, you know, the two, you know, when I was very little, the two of us watching it. And yeah, and I mean, especially, I mean, that's one thing that I've kind of gone back and rewatched during this era, because it's, you know, it's actually one of the few things that you can kind of watch that gives you a little bit of hope for the future of humanity.
Yes.
It's a very, I mean, it's like kind of, you know, one of the ultimate like utopian stories, especially in like popular, you know, popular culture. There's it's not a lot that,
especially sci-fi and pop culture, you know, it's always apocalyptic dreariness, you know.
Well, right, and even like one of the main writers from Star Trek: The Next Generation was Ronald D. Moore, who then went and created Battlestar Galactica, which is the complete opposite of Star Trek in so many ways, where it's just like, no, like you know, the ultimate of like cynicism and just like, you know, humanity.
Oh yeah.
Terrible. I don't get me wrong, I loved Battlestar Galactica too.
But, I was gonna say, this has come up recently, actually. I have never watched the original, but I watched the 2004 series, and I really liked it. I love how it's just like a a slow speed space chase for like 4 seasons, you know, and there's all this like political drama and intrigue going on, but it is like the most cynical perspective of the future that Star Trek could have possibly spun off of, you know.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, they're both, I think they're both equally valid.
Mhm.
Battlestar probably, if you forced me to pick, is probably more realistic. but part of me just like still holds out hope that one day we'll abandon money and status, and we'll embrace exploration for the sake of exploration, and science, and just floating around the galaxy, with and being on a ship with people that you have the utmost respect for. I love in Star Trek: The Next Generation, anytime a character can come to another character and then be like, I think I saw a ghost in my room, and their reaction isn't like, you're insane. They're like, we need to do another scan of this room. Like, if you say there was a ghost, like, there probably was a ghost. And it's charming and it's heartwarming, people who have that the respect for one another, that they trust them and believe in the best of people.
What about are you watching Star Trek Discovery and Kirk and all that? Or not Kirk.
I haven't seen any of the kind of modern shows. I'm just like hopelessly behind on all of television.
Oh no, I'm really behind on stuff too. I try to find things that I really like and just like stick to it, like do you watch The Orville?
No, I've heard that that's like a pretty good like Star Trek homage.
Yeah. See, that one I discovered maybe like a year and a half ago, and like binged all 2 seasons. And I'll tell you, the first season is kind of rocky because it was obviously billed as like the Seth MacFarlane comedy with Star Trek elements. But the truth is, like, the comedy didn't really work. And he loves Star Trek so much, it was almost like he couldn't make fun of it or like spoof it, And so it actually, toward the end of the first season, it gets pretty good as they start to iron out a lot of those kinks. And then the second season, like that whole season is just rock solid. Like they really find their own footing. And it's like this very loving homage to Star Trek, but at the same time, like it also, the second season, they drop pretty much all the comedy. They still have a guy that's kind of like, I guess, like dumb, he does all the random things, but they really toned down the slapsticky kind of comedy and stuff, and they turn it into something that's really trying to explore different pathways and different realities. They like discover this giant, like just like insanely massive ship, and like the people that are there have like, they're basically a colony, and so they explore this idea that like they have to go in there and explain to these people like that this isn't a real world that you live in. Like this is a giant ship and you're just floating through space, and they think that there's like gods and stuff. So they're having to like shatter these people's reality and deliver the truth because it's on a crash course, and so it gets really interesting and into some really creative and interesting territory with the storytelling.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, even you just describing that plot, going and having to tell an alien race that you're actually not the center of the universe, and actually there's all this other stuff going on. I mean, it's almost as if it's a parable for people on Earth,
right?
Almost.
There's a great take on like social media and stuff. They go to a planet and they get into like a big PR mess and stuff, and it kind of plays on like Idiocracy meets like the Meow Meow Beans episode of Community or something. It's really good stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. So earlier you did mention sci-fi. Obviously, we've talked quite a bit about that, but fantasy, and probably like I don't want to say the best thing that I read, because you did a lot of really good work here, but I really like Spirit Drifters. Like, I think this needs to be more than it is, and it definitely blends like the fantasy and the sci-fi. So where did that come from? Because that one blew me away, and it's like the last one in the list here. And I got to that, I was like, oh my god, like this is so cool.
Well, thanks. That one came from, well, that one was actually more of me kind of finding the artist first. And that was, so Eric Whalen was the artist that I collaborated with on Spirit Drifters. And I don't remember exactly how I came across his like social media account, but I saw he posted somewhere and had like a link to his website. And I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Clicked on it, and his site, first of all, I mean, it had like just page after page. I mean, like, you know, like you go through, scroll through like a handful, 20 images, and then it would be like, okay, well, you go to page 2, and then you look, and it's like, you know, 2 of like 20, 23 or 24. And I was like, how does this person have this much art on here, and like no one knows who this is? I mean, like, as far as I knew, you know, he had done a lot of self-published work, but I was like, you know, a lot of times when you're like a writer in comics starting out, and even not starting out, it, you know, part of the difficulty is because you're, you know, much lower on the hierarchy of talent, you it can be a struggle to find people to work with, because obviously like the talented people quickly ascend that ladder, and kind of get out of your range. And so like you know, it's important to kind of find other people that are on your same wavelength, and then you kind of like, you know, ideally like kind of ascend
kind
together,
of work up together,
collaborate and do that. So I was kind of just like blown away. I was like, how is this person not like a professional comic book artist? And just clicking through his artwork, I was just like, God, like he just had so many really incredible pieces, and he had a lot of art that was inspired by kind of these like classic role-playing games, fantasy role-playing games. So like, you know, Zelda and Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, which are like the games that I grew up playing, and you know, I still have to this day, like the like not the instruction manual, but the like the guidebooks. So you like, like local grocery store, and like they're
like Prima and Brady.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like I still have, you know, like the Final Fantasy and Secret of Mana and all that stuff. So when I saw all those pieces, I was like, oh well, like I have to email him right away, and it has to be something set in this like kind of fantasy world. I don't think that I told him this, but when I emailed him, I had like no idea what I had no script, and I was just like, I want to work with you, and kind of left it at that, thinking to myself like, well, every time I email an artist, there's always this like lag period. It's usually like a week or 2 before they like kind of get back to you, and it's always kind of like their response is usually not like 100% complete. So then you kind of have to write another email, and it's, you know, it's kind of this like back and forth to get to the point of like, okay, well, here's the script and here's the idea. And he literally emailed me back like an hour later and was like, cool, I'm ready, man. And I was like, well, that's a problem. So what I then did was, it's like, just so happened that like that weekend I was I live in North Carolina, and that weekend I was driving up to Richmond in Virginia for just to like go do something, you know, go up and visit, I guess. And so on the drive up, I was like, okay, time to think of a story. And literally just somehow in my head, I just popped into my mind this picture of these two like kind of travelers outside of a giant gate with these like giant robots protecting it. And I was like, okay, like this has to be the idea, because I literally have to write this weekend. and yeah, just kind of went from there. So like over the course of being in Richmond, like while I was out doing other things, in the back of my mind the entire time I was kind of like plotting, okay, well, what if they were the robots malfunctioned, and what if they had to like save the town, and kind of built the world out from that scenario. And then came home very quickly, kind of wrote it, sent the email to Eric, and kind of went from there. And that one ended up, so because our original idea was that was the first time I tried Kickstarter, and so part of the idea there as well was like, okay, well, let's start with something small, not try and like go too crazy, because I was worried that we wouldn't be able to get it funded because I'd never done it before. So it was like, okay, well, to keep the cost low, we have to tell kind of a simple story, or like a shorter story, I should say. And then the Kickstarter ended up being successful enough to where we were able to add the two. So we added a prose short story kind of in between the main kind of story, and then another, I think, 8 or 9 page story that we added at the end, to kind of help, like, yeah, build out the world just a little bit more. Again, in the hopes that, like, if somebody came across, somebody at a publisher came across it and liked it, they could see like, oh, this is a world that you could tell like multiple kind of stories in.
Oh man, I tell you, like, I was reading it, right, and I was like, this is so good, and like it feels like I'm getting to an end point, and I don't know why, because there's no way this is over. And so I checked the thing, the page count, because it was down there that said like 16 of 32 or something. I was like, oh yes, like, I'm glad this is not over. This adventure is so cool. I want more. And then like 2 pages later it ended, and then it was like this really cool prose piece. Like, it was really awesome, and it really like expanded and just like helped more, but it was so weird. Like, I was like, I want more. Like, why does it have to end now? So that's the one, like Saltwater, I could see more happening in that world, but I don't know. Spirit Drifters, like, that was a really cool world. It kind of opens up, and it reminded me of Dragon Ball was like my first reference for it. It was like this desert, and they're just traveling through this desert, and then there's like these stone villages and stuff that very reminiscent of like the Middle East, but they're talking about how they can use magic, but they're not supposed to because it's illegal. And I'm like, this is interesting stuff, and they go in and they talk about the robots guarding the doorway and stuff. And I'm like, okay, like now that's where I really was like, okay, this is like Dragon Ball. Like, they're just kind of wanderers in a desert, and they come across these towns, and like, I don't know, there might be dinosaurs out there, but there might not be, but I wouldn't be surprised if they show up, but I would be surprised how are they going to fight them, and stuff like that.
Dragon Ball Z?
Not Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball, before Dragon Ball Z.
Wait, what? I didn't know there was anything before Dragon Ball. I thought just Dragon Ball Z was its own thing. Was this no? Or what?
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z is a sequel series. There's an original series called Dragon Ball, and Goku is a kid, and that was an action adventure show. Like, he was just like, he knew about the 7 Dragon Balls, and he was traveling the world to collect them, and he stumbles across somebody named Master Roshi that trains him, and he's on these adventures, and it's just him and his friends like wandering from town to town trying to track down all the Dragon Balls. And every time they get to a town, something will happen. It's under attack by a monster, so they fight the monster and free the people or whatever. But that was kind of the world it was set in, was like desert with like different kinds of villages and stuff that they would stumble across, and like there would be dinosaurs, but also like technology like we have, and like you couldn't really pinpoint it as to like a time period. It just had all these different elements, and that's what this reminded me of like, there might be but once you said like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, like that makes a lot of sense. You know, that's kind of the same vibe as like that big empty desert where you just kind of wander around and stumble into stuff and there's monsters along the way. So that's 100% what I thought, like reading this. I was like, there's so much out here in this desert that could be explored. I really want to know like what else is out there in this world.
Hey, yeah, me too. I mean, definitely something that you know, I could, you know, could expand on at some point. And but yeah, no concrete plans as of right this moment. Eric's currently is actually working on a project with Milton Lawson.
Oh,
the aforementioned.
nice.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I would love to kind of revisit. And yeah, because I mean, I mean, other than when I was a kid and like getting into comics, I mean, the other thing that just like, yeah, was very kind of key in activating my imagination were those like video games.
Mm-hmm.
Not only because, I mean, they actually had legitimately like great stories, great characters, but they also had like, I love the music in those games. The music is so good. And it's funny because now, like as an adult, I'll be listening to, like, I went through this phase where I was listening to a lot of like prog rock from like the 1970s, and you put on like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and you're like, oh, this is the fight music from Final Fantasy. Like, and then you look it up and it's like, sure enough, like all these like Japanese composers were like, oh yeah, we loved like prog, you know. And I love that because I love when, you know, it's like American company putting out Japanese video games inspired by weird English art rock dudes. You know, and it's like, again, to kind of tie into like the utopian mood of Star Trek. Like I think that's one thing that art does so well, is that it can tie together all of these disparate like kind of cultures and people. I mean, even I was watching, Netflix has a series, it's called Song Exploder, which I think is based on a podcast where they take a song and they basically kind of deconstruct it and talk about the history of the song and like the band's, you know, chronology or whatever. And one of the first songs is "Losing My Religion" by REM, which is like one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah.
And within like the first like 5 or 10 minutes, they're talking to Peter Buck, the guitar player, and he says, yeah, you know, I was sitting like on the tour bus, I think, and I was playing this part on my mandolin, and it kind of reminded me of this piece by the musician Ryuichi Sakamoto. And I was like, oh my God, like that's one of my all-time favorite pieces of music, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence by Ryuichi Sakamoto. And I was just like, how did I not? And once he said that and they played it, I was like, oh yeah, of course. Like that's exactly it. But again, like, I just think it's so cool that like this song by Ari, you know, this indie rock group from Athens, Georgia, their big hit is basically based on a piece by an avant-garde Japanese composer. I just think that's awesome. Like, I think it's so cool. And like,
oh yeah.
And just the way that like throughout history, I mean, like all of art is kind of this like this interesting passing of knowledge and information down, you know, throughout time. And like, yeah, I think that's one of the things that is like so appealing to me about just the arts in general.
Yeah,
it's an interesting form of you know, time travel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think that's amazing. I think the most interesting thing I know about like intercultural media is I love Power Rangers. I grew up on Power Rangers, right?
Yeah.
So they took the Japanese footage of Super Sentai, they cut it into an American show, mixed it with American shot scenes, right, and created a show. So there's a fandom here where like people take Super Sentai from Japan and they put fan subs, you know, and then you can watch it on the internet. So that's cool, right? we're basically trying to like adopt their culture. Well, there's the same thing in Japan. There are Japanese people that are importing episodes of Power Rangers and subbing them for Japanese people to watch. So they're getting like the recycled version of their own culture, and like that to me is amazing. Like that's like art at its finest. It's just like we are sending them back something they've already sent to us, also modified, you know.
Yeah, it's like putting something into Google Translate and then putting it back into Google Translate, sending it back. Like it's not going to
like
come
is it
out
gonna
right.
get the same message? Yeah.
Yeah.
Something will be lost in translation, you know.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's amazing. So man, we've talked about a lot of your stuff, and there's still so much more. But okay, well, like Chameleons, let me go back to that real quick because I wanted to ask you about that. Like, oh, actually, let me say this: Spirit Drifters. This is one of those I was talking about earlier. Like, all this person wanted was cake. Like, it was simply advice. Like somebody that just like they're on a very important mission. They're on this adventure or whatever. But like, there's all these laws and stuff. Like, you should not go out of your way and disturb anything, you know, whenever you're under this strict rule. And yet, cake, like it was all about a vice, you know, like it could have been a cigarette or a beer, but instead it was cake, and it made the story pay off that much better because it was like you're willing to break all these rules and possibly get us like thrown in prison because we know magic for cake, but the cake is that good.
It's possibly my most autobiographical work. Yeah. I mean,
it's almost like a Harold and Kumar go to White Castle kind of mission, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What do you say, you know?
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to this, the negatives. What is the negatives? Like, because I was like, I think it's, you know, like bad superheroes or something, like anti-heroes, but it's not. It's almost like negative emotion heroes. Was it? I don't know.
Yeah,
like, can you explain that?
It was basically. I mean, I think the pitch on the Kickstarter was the Avengers meets Arrested Development. So it was kind of, it was you know, very much like, yeah, it's this team of heroes, but their powers, if you even want to call them powers, are not really all that helpful as far as being a superhero, and they're all kind of based on these like you know, feelings of depression or despair. One of the characters is this, he's a comedian, he wants to be a stand-up comic, but his like superpower is that like anytime he tells a joke, it just like depresses you into like a state of immobility. So yeah, so that one, and yeah, that one was very much kind of these, not even really like the subtext, but the whole thing is about like this team of heroes who are basically at this point become a corporate entity who are out for just protecting their own like intellectual property rights, and you know, focusing on action figure sales and who's playing who in the latest movie, and not really focused on like actually being a hero or actually helping anybody.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is my incredibly thinly veiled opinion of, you know, kind of the general state of like superhero like culture, in, you know, specifically in the movies, but you know, I don't read a lot of the comics, but you know, as someone who grew up reading superhero comics, and I always, you know, one of the things that I liked about them was, you know, that these characters were people that, you know, what I always liked about Spider-Man is that, you know, the friendly neighborhood aspect, and that the fact that he would kind of like stop what he was doing to help an old lady walk across the street, which they actually, to their credit, like they do in the like the Tom Holland Spider-Man, which I love that like sequence, but more often than not, it's the focus is on just like, you know, blowing things up. And I just don't find that interesting. And then on top of all that, you know, the notion that you have what is now a multi-billion-dollar industry built essentially on the back of one guy named Jack Kirby, whose family had to just fight like tooth and nail to get like a pittance of, you know, money, because back in the day when Jack Kirby was every other week creating an entire new set of mythologies for Marvel Comics, you know, there was no such thing as a cinematic universe.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as, you know, the notion that these things that he was creating would last beyond him and become these like global
Iconic.
people, yeah, iconic. It was just like so outside of the realm of possibility. Yeah, so basically the negatives was kind of like, well, what if you had like, yeah, this kind of like corporate superhero team who, you know, are all frauds, and then the main character, who is like the former sidekick, kind of gets kicked out and then decides to start his own team, who are, you know, are going to be like, you know, actually heroic. But yeah, and that, you know, I love that. I loved how that turned out. That one, the artist I worked with was Jacoby Salcido on that, and I loved his I loved his art, and I loved the, like, it looked particularly good in black and white. I
Yeah.
like
I was gonna say, like, one of the like coolest things about it is the way that it's done in black and white, because it really like fits the tone and depicts the nature of these characters. Because, like, you know, it's almost like a manifestation of like I don't know, like antidepressants or something. Like, they all have like the worst luck, and like they're all kind of like moody and negative, you know. And I think the black and white panel work and everything just looks really great with it, and really explores that vibe and that energy about it, you know. It's almost like it's sucking the colors out of it, you know.
Oh yeah, totally. And I mean, I personally I love black and white comics. I love black and white film. I mean, one of my very like strange kind of opinions is that more film should be in black and white, and that if you use color, like, it should have a purpose. It shouldn't just be because we have color film. You know, if you look at somebody like Guillermo del Toro, he's the kind of filmmaker that basically makes kind of almost black and white movies, but like in the sense that like his use of color, like in like The Shape of Water, it's like the opening kind of scenes is so masterfully art directed that there's no color that is out of place. It's all has a purpose. There's no random stray, you know, moment of orange off in the corner. No, like he will, you know, there's, it's not a great movie, but the movie Panic Room that David Fincher directed.
Oh, I haven't seen it, but
It's not very good. So I mean, I wouldn't. But in the behind the scenes, in the behind the scenes, there's literally footage of David Fincher like out on the street. Who's David Fincher famously, you know, micromanager to the infinite degree of like doing 100 takes and all this stuff. But he literally is outside and he like looks down the street and he's like, okay, I don't want to see a single car on this block that is not silver or black. and everyone on the set's like, okay, Mr. Fincher, like, and I mean, that is the level of detail that he, you know, but not everyone does that. So like, because I you know, I think that color is an incredibly powerful like storytelling tool. And it's one thing that I like in a lot of my scripts. It's like the specific colors are always like very, you know,
like very intention.
Yes, there's a lot of intention there. Sorry, my cat was sleeping, and I wanted to move him out of this room because I was like, well, we're going to be recording this podcast, but he was like so cute sleeping there that I was like, oh, he'll be fine. And now he's like, I don't know what he's doing. He's rubbing himself against the heat vent. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No, I was gonna say, yeah, I feel the same. Like there should be an intentionality to color and how things are used. You know, and like whenever I was in high school, I was in art class, and I always had this real weird focus on like drawing these black and white images that would have like one color to them. You know, like one item would be red or something. You know, and I always thought that that was really interesting and underused. You know, something like Sin City, you know, where they use the black and white with the real bright colors and stuff. You know, I think that's a concept I would like to see spread into more film and more movies and cinema because they don't like the colors almost non-intentional unless the object that it's on is of extreme focus, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. So now what I'm working on is I'm working on kind of two main projects, and both of them are related to the work I've done with the artist Martin Lorbecki. So the two things are, one is we're working on doing more in kind of this world of the uncanny valley, kind of this idea of in a sci-fi anthology that's kind of like a Twilight Zone, Black Mirror kind of universe for us to kind of explore these kind of like different themes of things that kind of interest us. And then and so we're working on that, and then we're also working on a new series. It's called Merryweather. That's as we were talking about before, it's very influenced by kind of Star Trek and kind of a more utopian future. So the two stories that we've done so far in Uncanny Valley and future ones are much more in the column of they're a little darker. They're not necessarily overflowing with hope. And so I thought that, I mean, for a variety of reasons, at the start of the year, I kind of thought, I would like to try and challenge myself and try and work on a story that can find some optimism. And so we kind of came up with the story, which is it's set in the future, in a future where humanity, because of climate change and wars and things of that nature, decides like we have to kind of move underground and wait for the earth to kind of heal itself. But in addition, it's not just healing itself. They've also set up these like basically kind of like artificial intelligence like seed pods around the world to kind of basically, so the notion is like in the future these AI machines will basically kind of recreate the earth in however form they want. So it's almost like they're given creative license to recreate the world. And then the story is about the first team of humans who go out into this new like kind of AI created earth and go exploring. And so the title Merryweather is from Meriwether Lewis, from Lewis and Clark, and it's very it's very similar to like how Star Trek is about exploring and going from new civilization to new civilization. So
yeah,
that's kind of the other kind of main focus as far as that goes. And then I have as always, I mean, I have multiple kind of other ideas and scripts that I'm working on. I've recently, it's been a while since I've done this, but I kind of again sat down and was like, it's been a while since I've actually just like written something just for me that's just fun, that I don't have to worry about like, well, how will I find an artist and how will I get this financed? And so I've been working, that's what the other kind of comic related thing I've been working on is this kind of like personal project. It's just kind of basically for fun. I mean, obviously, hopefully one day, I would like to see it become a reality, but I think it's a little further down the line probably. And then, yeah, outside of comics, I mean, I've been doing been doing like a lot of prose writing, writing a lot of short stories and poetry, and my brother is working on him and a group of friends are working on a video game. He's a computer programmer, so I've been working with him and helping him kind of develop the story for that. And so it's trying to do some,
Nice.
new and different things to kind of challenge myself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the that Merriweather idea, I really like that. That's I wrote a blog recently, but that's something that I've seen a lot in a lot of like sci-fi and just like apocalyptic stuff has become almost like post-apocalyptic, where they're like looking at like how do we rebuild civilization after an apocalyptic event, and how does civilization progress if we still knew like the technology and stuff, and what the ethical and moral outcomes of some of these inventions were, like if we remake gunpowder, well, now there's ammunition out there, which means people can like start wars. So do we even want to invent that, knowing like the path the bad path it takes, So that's kind of become a theme I've seen and stuff, and I think it's a really cool theme because it gives you as like a writer and a creator to kind of explore a world where you kind of know the outcomes of certain things and what the potentials are. And so you can use characters to explore like the morals and the ethics behind like inventing and creating and rebuilding society.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I also think that at least from like a creative point of view, I think it's a lot more challenging to come up with a story that has these themes of kind of resilience and hope, as opposed to stories about how everything sucks.
Yeah.
And I obviously have written plenty of the latter, so it's not like they don't have value, I hope, but
Mhm.
I think in general too. I mean, like a lot of those, um, a lot of the, and like Star Trek does this a lot, where you have these stories that, because most stories are based on, and like almost every writing book you'll read is like, okay, the first thing you need to do is conflict.
Yeah.
Conflict is the heart of every story. And my favorite writer, one of my favorite writers, writer Ursula K. Le Guin, a science fiction writer, she has this whole essay that's about like, well, why does every story have to be about conflict? A story can be anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to have a conflict to be, it's more difficult to be interesting if you don't have a conflict.
Yeah.
And that can be scary. It can be scary if if
Mhm.
you don't have like, if you take away a lot of the tools that are just kind of like an instant, press a button and people will react a certain way. You start taking those away, gets a lot harder to do your job or do something interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I
so,
mean, I feel that way about like the act structure, You do cinema, you do 3 acts. If you do comic books, you're probably writing in 3 acts. And then the other common is 5 acts. But there's so many other frameworks out there. They're just harder. And you have to learn them. But learning them and perfecting them, to a certain extent, it typically pays off. Getting creative like that, putting yourself in constraints that test you in new ways, like it can generally pay off to learn those things. So the idea of like learning to create story without conflict, like that sounds like where the fun's really at. Like, that's how you push yourself and challenge yourself.
totally. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, we're in a lot of mediums, we're getting further away from like, and that's one of the things that, one of the reasons I like working in like these sometimes shorter and sometimes longer. It's like, well, I don't have to do 22 pages. I can do however many pages I need to.
Hmm.
Like I can do 8 pages or 30 or what. And the same thing with like a lot of TV now that everything's streaming and it isn't based on, it's going to air at 8 p.m. and something else has to air at 8:30. So obviously
Hmm.
your show has to be a certain length. It's like, No,
Yeah.
episodes can be an hour, they can be 20 minutes, you know, and
Not that I haven't watched any of The Mandalorian, so you may or may not have more input here. But one thing I do understand is that they are like the first show that's really breaking that. Because even like your Netflix and Hulu originals still stick to some pretty like standard time frames, you know. And I've heard The Mandalorian, some episodes are real short and some are real long and some fall in between. And I think that's interesting and cool because they are finally taking advantage of the streaming model and the idea that you're no longer beholden to commercial breaks or time slots, you know?
yeah. Well, and I think that, I mean, that's, I mean, one of the things that I find really fascinating kind of across all mediums is time and how each story or every idea has kind of I think has like kind of an inherent amount of time that can be generated out of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, if you look at like pop music, it's like, well, a song basically 3 to 4 minutes and you're done.
Yeah.
The reason why you don't have a lot of 20-minute pop songs is because no one wants to listen to, you
Britney
know,
Spears.
nah, 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 Hey Jude for 20 minutes. I mean, that song's already one of the longer ones. It's like 8 minutes, but,
Yeah.
um, and you know, it's the same every time I pick up a book. I mean, the first thing I look at is like, well, how long is it? And it
Mm-hmm.
isn't because I don't want to read a long book, although it doesn't help that I have a million books to read. So like the shorter the better. But you know, I think that good artists will recognize whatever their idea is, they'll recognize, um, you know, how long
Mm-hmm.
is the story or how much time does the story take up? I mean, that's one of my issues with kind of modern comic books, although my former example of music is kind of a bad example because it's kind of the same thing where like the reason why pop songs are also 3 minutes is because radio stations would only play songs over 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And the same reason why albums are the length they are is because, well, that's literally how much space you have on a record.
Yeah.
You know, maybe Pink Floyd wanted to make Dark Side of the Moon 4 hours longer. Who knows? But that just wasn't even a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a lot more freedom where you can do these kind of like long form albums where there is no
Yeah.
limit because it's just on a streaming service somewhere. But
Mm-hmm.
comics, I feel like so often the problem now is that, you know, we want to do 6 issues and then put it together as a trade paperback. And then we're going to sell that trade paperback. And then the problem is that the story is like 2.5 issues worth of a story. And so how do you
Mm-hmm.
make 6 issues out of that? Well, you just stretch it out. And when you do that, it becomes bad because it's not supposed to be stretched out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm 100% in your camp. Like, I got to a point where I would be reading an issue and I would say, okay, well, like I can tell we just hit act 3. Like there's all the character development just suddenly stopped and now we're wrapping up loose ends and it doesn't feel appropriate. And so I started paying attention. And when I was getting there was like those 20 to 22 page comics. Like it drives me crazy. Outside of like Stan Sakai, Usagi Yojimbo, like that book still hits. I don't know why. It's still coming out and it's still good. But every other like 20-page comic I read, I'm like, there's not enough time here to develop a story. So what you end up with is not a story, you know? They don't have enough time to build anything. So you never get connected to it. And then last year, Thumbs came out and that was printed like, I think the first issue was like 50 pages, but the other 4 issues are 32 pages. And that's kind of became my standard. Like when I look at a comic book now, if it's less than 32 pages, I'm already going to assume that I'm not going to get invested because you just can't build enough in only 20 pages. And then this year you saw Brubaker and Phillips come along and they started doing like these novellas and stuff like that. And when you listen to them in interviews, they're like, yeah, I didn't let the the publisher dictate anything. Like, I wrote the story the way it needed to be told, and however many pages that was, that's how many we made, you know, like, and that's something I've really come to believe. Like, the way they sell comics, like, you're not walking into a store and picking one up. So they don't all have to fit this same format and style. Like, people are following these on social media. They know 3 months before the book comes out whether they're buying it or not. So let's break that mold and write books and stories that take up how many pages they need to. No more, no less, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I agree with you, but I would also argue that, like, personally, like, I like the challenge of saying, I mean, I think in general, creative people do well when they have boxes and limits placed on them. I generally think creative people don't do a great job when it's like, okay, here's ultimate freedom. It's usually how you end up with, like, you know, complete disasters. Not always. Sometimes, yeah. I mean, like, Brubaker and Phillips, they know what they're doing at this point. So, but I generally think that, like, having constraints usually leads to, because anytime you have a constraint, it basically forces you to be creative. It's just like if you say, you know, if you start taking, like I was saying earlier about, like, the tools, you know, take out color, take out dialogue. You can't have dialogue anymore. And like, here's your genre. And then you have to start getting creative. What do I do? And I mean, I will say, like, I recently started, I went back and I've been rereading The Invisibles, the Grant Morrison series that Vertigo put out. And one 20-page or 22-page issue of that comic could fill, like, multiple graphic novels. I mean, there's almost at some points, well, at many points, there's, like, too much information. I mean, it's like just bursting at the seams with concepts and so, like, and the same thing of, like, you go back and read, you know, Sandman. It's the same thing. Like, you read this and you're just like, all you have to do is look at a page and just look at how much, like, text there is. Although I don't, you know, just because there's text on it doesn't mean that it's necessarily good, or that a lot of text equals great story. My comic, The Ghost Butterfly, I sent my mom like, well, I sent her the book, but I think I sent her, like, the PDF first, and she, like, I think she, like, wrote me back. She's like, "Did you send me the one with the dialogue? Because I don't see any dialogue." And I was like, "Well, there's dialogue later." It's just a very silent book. So, you know, I'm usually not overly verbose in my own comic writing, but in general, I do think that because of a lot of different reasons, it's just, like, not as incentivized now to pack everything into every issue. It's like, well, don't worry, like, we gotta stretch this out for 6 issues. So,
Yeah.
You know, don't get too crazy and wrap everything up with one issue. And, you know, I think certain writers, you know, do that really well. It's like, kind of take that challenge of saying, like, okay, I've got 22 pages. I'm going to tell a complete story, and I'm going to further the mythology, and I'm going to have all these interesting, you know, almost kind of like tangents or whatever, you know, like in the Invisibles book that I was reading. I mean, it's, like, set during the French Revolution, and there's, like, the poets, like, Lord Byron and Shelley are having a conversation. Then, you know, on the next page, the Marquis de Sade shows up, and I was like, I feel like I need, like, Wikipedia open while I'm reading this. And, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm also not stupid. Like, I you know, I can kind of follow it along, but I was just like, I mean, this is, like, and, you know, I read it first when I was, like, in high school. I had no idea what I was, no idea what was happening. And so, like, reading it now, it's just like, yeah, it's kind of incredible how much you can pack into such a small kind of container. I do think that art has kind of been lost, and, you know, I'm certainly not bringing it back, but
Yeah, I listen to, like, a lot of podcasts and stuff, and one of the things that often comes up when people talk, especially about, like, the 80s era, or, like, Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont on X-Men seems to be a big focus of, like, things that are happening in the panel, you know, like whole subplots could be like never spoken but told in the background of panels, you know. And I think that's an interesting concept because you see a lot of like the modern comics, these writers are getting very into like these big ideas and stuff, but they're not really packing their books. They're kind of so hyper focused on that one concept and making sure that comes across. A lot of times a lot of the panels and the story itself feel real hollow and empty.
Yeah, I mean, it's in my mind, it's kind of there's two issues. It's like one, because of the how these stories are being produced and the economics, these creators is like in a lot of cases just literally don't have the time it would take to properly, you know, put the appropriate amount of work into it.
Mhm.
And then I also think part of it is also you have a lot of these creators who their frame of reference is really only comic books. And so like when your frame of reference is only comic books, I mean it's very like you know, the
Mhm.
snake eating its tail, where it's like you need like other influences to come in at a certain point
Yeah.
and kind of like help develop things and keep things interesting.
Have you
Um,
seen or have you read any of Donny Cates' crossover book that's happening right now?
I have not. I
No.
was talking to my collaborator Martin, and he was mentioning I think that he picked that up and said it was pretty good.
Yeah, the first episode or the first issue to me was kind of, I don't know, it felt really slow and kind of boring to be honest, but the second issue really kicked things up a lot, but it's kind of what you're describing. Like if I had to guess right now, I would say Donny Cates is writing a story about Donny Cates writing a story. And that's still yet to be revealed, but that's definitely what feels like is going on because there's like all this stuff and like some of the panels are in blue pencils and stuff, so you're seeing the book being created basically before your eyes. But I don't know, I feel like if you weren't into comics, the book would make no sense because like it's the most purest form of, because it's referencing comic book writing techniques and like comic book creation techniques and comic book writers and the comic book community. Like everything about it is so insular to what, you know, the nature of comic book fandom that it's crazy. You know, it's like what you were describing, the snake eating the snake's tail, you know, like it just goes round and round, you know.
Well, and that's something that I try and focus on in the comics that I write is I you know I find it very difficult to recommend comics in general to people that don't read comics, which is most of the people that I know in my life. Like, don't
Yeah.
read comic books. And I mean, the sad truth is that if somebody asks me for a recommendation, I don't know what to say because anything that I would recommend requires like a hour long explanation of the
Why
vagaries.
you should or shouldn't read this.
Well, not just that, but just the the chronology and oh well, this universe and this
Mhm.
this person died and then they came back and now someone's a clone and it's just like
Yeah.
it sounds like nonsense. And I think that the comic book industry would be so much better off if they focused more on books that it's literally just like I hand it to you, read the back, I guess, to get a sense of the genre or whatever, and just like everything you need to know is inside this package.
Mhm.
I mean, that's why books have lasted so long. It's like somebody hands you Jane
A
Eyre. It's like,
novel
well,
and
I don't need to know like the Bronte cinematic universe. I can just read Jane Eyre and I get it.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
everything you need is in that kind of contained unit. And like, even like the one of the easiest things to recommend is like Watchmen. It's like, well, Watchmen is
Mhm.
self-contained. It's just 12 issues. You don't need to know any of these characters' backstory. But so much of what makes Watchmen an enjoyable reading experience is the fact that it's all kind of speaking through all these
construction
tropes and
of
the construction
yeah.
of comics and all this stuff. So even in that case, it's like, well, there's so much that you'll be missing if you don't have the kind of underlying vernacular of the medium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah. No, I agree with you because I think like there's a huge problem with in comics right now with people not bringing in new viewership, you know? Like as long as your people are aging up, they're eventually going to go away and so we need young readers. And I think the biggest misconception that especially a lot of these corporations have is that if you give somebody a comic like that they'll just read it and like it or they won't like comics or whatever, you know? But truth be told, we teach people to read and then they read books. You know, you teach them to drive and then they drive a car, but nobody teaches you to read comics. You have to spend time doing that. And so the idea that you would just like have nothing but these books where they have to learn about continuity and how to read a comic at the same time, like I want to see like DC do like even if it's just like quarterly, like an anthology that's just like 4 or 5 short stories of characters in the DC universe that are completely unconnected, you know, like no continuity or anything. Something that really focuses on like the fundamentals of comics so you can give it to new people and they can say like you don't need to know anything, you just need to focus on reading the story and getting enjoyment out of this story because when you do that and you learn how to read comics, then it gets really interesting. Then you can like learn about all this history, you know, but it's very daunting to have to learn about the history of these characters and the timelines and stuff and learn how to read comics because I don't think that's as natural as people think it is.
yeah, I mean, how these stories have spawned a multi-billion-dollar film franchise that's lasted longer than a decade and has not translated basically to any sales from the originating medium is kind of insane.
Yeah.
You just like have to imagine like who is in charge of your marketing and fire them immediately.
Yes.
Um,
That's my biggest complaint is that they do not translate that stuff properly. They don't care about the comics because if they did, they would be sending all of the viewers to the comic shops.
right, and I mean, I guess I understand that to a certain degree, but even if you just take a purely capitalist viewpoint, it's like, hey, you could make a lot of money if you actually put any effort into this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it would take a lot of effort, I don't think, to like convince people that, hey, you like this story on the movie screen. Here's the same story, but now on your phone or on your tablet or whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And
Yeah.
it's like again, like someone like me who I don't read a lot of superhero comics, and part of the reason is like I have an affinity for these characters, but like I have no idea what's happening in like Spider-Man. And I remember like at some point I was like getting nostalgic and I was like, I should like read a Spider-Man comic. That would remind me of when I was a kid. And then it was like, wait, Dr. Octopus is now Spider-Man? Like, what? And I like had no idea. I was like, I can't even imagine how you got here. And and if someone like me who has that background knowledge is like totally lost,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my opinion, there should always, at all times, be a Spider-Man comic and a Batman comic and a Superman comic that comes out every month. That's just like it's just a self-contained story. All you need to know is that Superman flies and
Mm-hmm.
kryptonite. All you need to know about Batman is his parents got murdered. All you need to know about Spider-Man is great power, great responsibility, and here's a fun story.
Yeah.
And the fact that
they constantly promise that and they never deliver.
Yeah, there's like 8 different books with crisscrossing narratives every which way. And like, I remember like when Marvel, I think it was when the Captain America, maybe it was when, I can't remember if it was like when the first Captain America came out or when the Avengers came out or something, but I remember like thinking like, oh, I wonder if this will translate to comic book sales. And then it was like at the time they were doing the death of Captain America. So it was like, great. So some kid walks out of the movie. He's like, oh, I love Captain America. Walks in and sees like Captain America literally like murdered on the steps of it. I was like, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't necessarily want them completely. Now I think they are at the point where it's very much a synchronized, you know, it's like the new movie rolls out, we have to have the book that, you know, issue number 1 and, you know, make it super reader friendly. And it's like, I don't necessarily want it that like kind of calculated, but
Seamless. Yeah.
at the same
Yeah.
time, like I said, if there was just a standard book where it's just like, if you want a good Spider-Man story, here you go, you know. It's kind of like they forever ago they had when they did like the Batman the animated series comic, and that was kind of like that was basically it was just like, you know, if you like Batman and you're a kid that likes Batman, it's like you just walk in and just pick that up and read it and enjoy it. Like you didn't need to know like
Yeah. So you'll
like,
really love this. They recently started another one called Batman: The Adventure Continues, and it's a lot of the original creative team from Batman the animated series, and they're doing a comic book. It's like a 6 or 7 part series that continues where the animated series left off, and it's like all connected and stuff. And now they've brought the Mask of the Phantasm into continuity and stuff, so they're even like killing all of that.
yeah, a friend of mine is another comic creator, Renton Hockey.
Oh, I love his stuff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was recommending. He's a big Batman the Animated Series fan. And he was talking about the Mask of the Phantasm appearance, and he was saying it was pretty good. So
Yeah, yeah, I heard it was good. I haven't read that story. I'm like you. I pretty much stay away from the big two. I talk to a lot of people in the community, so like I know a lot of what's going on in pretty much every book, but it's not something I keep up with. It doesn't hold my interest. Like for years and years and years, I tried to get into comics, and like I would start reading something, right? Like a superhero book, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. And then I would be like current. It's like, okay, you have to wait a month for the next one. And I'd completely forget it was coming, you know, like they just never had any sticking power with me. And I was like, I think I just don't like comic books. And then I found like indie, like Image and Boom Studios, like I found them, and that just like completely blew the world wide open for me. I was like, oh wait, like there's really cool stories going in here where like I don't have to know everything. I don't have to know these long continuities, and like, you know, that's what really brought me into it. And now I know a lot of the Marvel and DC history from knowing so many people and talking to so many people. But you know, that was a big turn away for me. It just never held my focus, because I would read an issue of a superhero comic and be like, I understood like maybe 2/3 of this, maybe half of it, and then the rest of it's just all gibberish because it's connected to something I've never even heard of, you know? So it, to me, it's kind of unfortunate that superhero comics are the face of the industry right now, because I think a lot more people would be coming into comics if they knew there was more than just spandex out there.
yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, if you look at, you know, it's like you know, there's a huge audience. It's just, yeah, it's not what is being catered to right now, you know. It's like you look at you know, like Scholastic books, the like Raina Telgemeier books. Those
Yeah.
millions upon millions of copies.
Dogman and Diary of a Wimpy Kid and stuff.
Sure. And like, you know, I'm not reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but like if I was running a publishing company, I would look and see, well, these books are selling millions of copies. Like
Yeah.
maybe we should, you know, create more content for, you know, these age groups, or, you know. And I mean, I think that some of that is happening, but yeah, I mean, it is like you're saying. I mean, it's, I don't know if they'll ever quite get away from the fact that like superheroes are the face of comic books, and like, you know, as much as I'm saying like I'm not really interested in reading them, like I do think they can be good. I
Oh
think
yeah.
it just, you know, it takes a lot of creativity and effort, and you don't always get that. A lot of times you
Yeah.
just get, basically, it's just kind of like these shepherds of this intellectual property that's just kind of, being these like proof of, every issue is like a proof of life,
Like
just
a proof of concept for a movie.
to
Yeah.
to convince somebody like, hey, well, like we can make a Disney Plus show of this in a year, like the last thing we need is another, the last like slate of Marvel announcements, like 30 different shows. I'm just like, how could anyone have the time to watch all of this?
Nobody, unless you're getting paid to watch all of that, you are not going to see everything. There's no way the average person is going to watch all of that.
No,
There was like 2 seasons of Daredevil, 2 seasons of The Punisher, I think there was 2 of all of them, right? On Netflix.
I have no
And
idea.
a majority of people did not even watch every single episode of those. So what makes you think they're going to watch like 30 Disney Plus shows? It's crazy.
Right. And I mean, even if I was a huge fan, if I was a huge fan, I would probably be even more daunted, because it's just like, oh my God, like I'm going to have to quit my job
Yeah.
to find the time to watch all this. And again, I don't think that, I have a suspicion that they will probably not be very good, because when you overextend yourself and are making 30 different shows, it's hard to focus and make sure that they're good. It's hard enough to make one thing that's good. And
Well, I mean, I see their upside there is like, we own everything, so we're making all the money. So like, we don't need to sell 1 million tickets to this movie as long as we sell 1 million tickets across all of these, And so I could see the upside there. My problem is the same thing they did with Star Wars. They're like, there's going to be a Star Wars movie in your theater every year. And that worked great for like 3 years. And then everybody was tired of Star Wars, And I can't imagine like these 10 new Star Wars shows they just announced, plus like all 25 new MCU things. Both of those franchises are going to be so oversaturated. Nobody's going to want to touch anything on them, like they're about, I don't know. To me, it feels like they're at that tipping point where they're about to kind of cannibalize on themselves, and superhero genre movies are going to disappear again.
yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right, and I think that it's just like greed that will kind of end up, destroying itself. And I mean, the thing that I find the most kind of like disheartening with that entire situation is that, I mean, take myself out of the equation, but even just, the people that I know personally who are artists who create comic books and are writers and work in any kind of creative medium. That's just the people I know. And then like, even if you extend that a little bit to like people that I'm like acquaintances with on social media, who I follow regularly and kind of keep up with what they're doing. It's like, even just in that kind of small circle, there is such a overwhelming amount of like creativity and talent that is just going completely, it's being completely ignored for the most part. And there's no room for anything, because all of the money and all of the attention is being sucked into these giant cinematic universes. Which, fine, I've gone and seen these movies, and I like some of them, but like I wish that there was more room for these like smaller kind of thing, or things that are different than what you're getting from that. And like like I said, it's disheartening to see all of that creativity and see it go kind of largely unheralded. But the good part is that that people do end up finding that stuff. It is harder. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I really miss about conventions, not being able to do that anytime soon, is that I haven't, like, as a creator, tabled at a ton of conventions, but even the limited experience I have, plus just experience of like going to them as a fan, like it's just so cool to be able to walk, walk down
Mm-hmm.
these aisles and just see people's banners and art all over the place. And you're just like, man, it's just so cool that there are all these people that, follow these muses
Yeah.
for just for the sake of that they enjoy it, that they do it. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't discourage them that, yeah, it isn't being made into a Disney Plus show. Or, it's just like, that, like and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but it's like, I have not only have I not made a profit on anything, like I'm sure I haven't even broken even. Like I mean, I should probably actually keep track of these kinds of things. In my head, I'm like, there's just no way that I've,
Yeah.
gotten anywhere close to that. And like, there's a lot of people like that. And yeah. And the intention is to eventually basically do kind of like a volume 1 collection that will have those 2 stories and hopefully a few more. And hopefully getting some other artists involved, and yeah, basically doing kind of like a collection that will have like multiple short stories that are all kind of like I said, like almost in a Twilight Zone kind of way, like having like these like shared themes, but not like, each story is kind of its own thing, can be its own genre, new characters. They aren't necessarily connected by anything other than kind of like similar ideas being explored.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of anthologies, so I think this is a really cool idea because I love multiple stories. Like I read 2000 AD, and that's a couple short stories, and some of them might not be my favorite, but I always feel like I get my value out of it. There's always something worth reading in there. And I would like to see American comics adapt more like anthology pieces and stuff like that. It seems like a big miss in our market for some reason because Japan and Europe seem very popular for them. So that's really cool. That's really interesting. I really like Chameleons and Earworm. Earworm was really cool for the music and the music worm, that they see. And then Chameleons, like that was just really cool the way they're like invisible, like that that art concept was really cool. I was like, what is going on here? And then it just really brings you into everything as they like go into the building the first time and they become visible.
Yeah, that was all. I mean, that was all Martin. Yeah, and I can't. Yeah, I forget. I mean, he did so many. He's incredibly prolific, and he's constantly like. You follow him on social media. He posts almost every day, probably new kind of concept art or sketches, and so I think the invisibility kind of cloaks in that went through a few different like iterations.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, I thought that the way that he kind of, or what he eventually settled on, I thought it looked great because I was kind of, I mean, I was honestly kind of a little concerned as I was writing it. I was like, how do you do invisibility and not have it be kind of the corny like dotted lines,
Yeah, like
figure?
Peanut style or something.
Yeah, and no, yeah, he well, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's the artist, smarter than I am, so he figured it out. And, yeah, I thought it looked great.
Yeah, that was a really cool idea. And that ending surprised me. I was like, I really don't know what's going to go down here, but I felt like that was like a really key element to that whole story is like I just really enjoyed being in the story and it almost felt like what could the ending be, and how important is it? Because like there was just something really fun about the vibe. Like I could feel the tension in the air, but I didn't know why or what to expect. And I thought that was really cool the way that y'all nailed that.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, my guess would be, I think that Martin did a particularly good job of, there's kind of like his use of, kind of like, what I'm trying to think what it's called, negative space, the way that like,
Hmm.
um, the way that like the certain pages, there's just like there's one page in particular where there's kind of like the back and forth dialogue between the father and the kids, and then it kind of pans out, and you see that the entire time they've been sitting in like a downed airplane.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like the wings in the snow and stuff, and like the page has a lot of negative space where there's just like not a lot of detail, but even just that small like kind of world building detail of this like downed plane, it just like it adds kind of like a history to that's like off the page that just like lets your imagination fill in like like how did this plane get downed, and it just kind of like speaks to the world that the story is set in more broadly, that like it's the kind of place where like you will take refuge in a downed airplane in this like snow covered apocalypse or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think his style in general can lend itself very well to that kind of almost like disquieting tension.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, whenever they're like talking with the family and they're realizing the problem and everything, it reminds me a lot of like No Country for Old Men, the Coen brothers movie adaptation, you know.
Yeah.
The way that there would be like these long scenes of just silence where like you know, like he's just sitting there in the chair, and like, you know, that like this isn't good, but you know, nobody's saying anything, and it makes you as the audience feel like kind of weird and awkward, you know. And I think that works. Like he's building tension in those moments by just having like a lot of just like you said, like negative space, like just empty open air is just there, and you can feel the tension through it, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I love No Country for Old Men. Yeah, and I mean that movie does a great job too of kind of the same thing, like you're saying, like making silence kind of menacing.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, yeah, a thing that I like. One of my favorite writers has a line that says, "Only speak if you can improve on the silence." So,
oh yeah. Oh man, that's
a lot of my stories have very little dialogue. It's just I'm like, well, is this improving on the silence? No.
yeah.
And then off you go. But
wow, that's awesome. Well, you have this collective of creators, and several of them have come up. So like, and I think I know all of them. So maybe I'm in your circle and don't even know it. But Renton Hockey, he has a series that he's putting on Webtoon, Digital Ronin Express. It's incredible. So I suggest everybody checks that out. And then
I co-sign that. I co-sign that endorsement.
Milton Lawson, you said he's working on something, but he has Detective Heller is that the last issue that's due out in I think 2 weeks now. So check that out.
Yes.
And I see Hassan's name popping up everywhere. I couldn't tell you what he has on the horizon. I don't know if you know anything that people should look for specifically.
I mean, he does a lot of lettering work. I would highly recommend the magazine that he did, like digital magazine that he edits called Panel X Panel. Yeah, I mean, like, and the amount of work that dude does is crazy, and it's fun being, you know, trying to be a part of that world.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I guess, do you have anything specific that you're promoting? Anything coming up next that you want to get people to look at, or do you have somewhere to buy all these wonderful stories we just talked about?
Well, I don't. I mean, I probably should promote something, but all I'll promote is you should definitely cut out the part where my cat knocked over all my books, and then I jumped at my cat and knocked over all the recording equipment. Very sorry about that. He's a complete idiot, so it's was to be expected. My website is www.apexquinn.com. So Aphex is APHEX Quinn.com. And if you go there, you can buy comics digitally, or you can buy print copies. And then I guess just on like social media for updates on what else I'm doing. And I generally try, my social media account is for the most part, I generally try and just keep it to like promoting my comics and like my friends' comics, and then just like interesting artwork that I've come across and things like that. Not for any I'm not saying that it's bad if you have like a lot of politics or things like that on your Twitter, but I'm like, I have enough of that everywhere else. And so I just want my little corner of social media is just like, here's some pretty art.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's all I have to promote, I guess.
Hey, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, all of these stories are great. I really don't know what I would tell people other than like Earworm, Spirit Drifters, and the Negatives. That's probably like probably my three favorite. I would suggest everybody check out, assuming they're all available.
Yes, there's plenty of copies available. Yeah, no.
So honestly, what he's saying is everybody should buy like 10 copies of Spirit Drifters each, give some out for Christmas or whatever birthdays are coming up or something, because this is going to be the next big thing. I really like this world you created. You gave us like, you gave us like a sliver of this, and I was just like, what's in this desert? What could they run into next? What's going on? Like there's robots and there's cake, and I want more. So everybody go buy it, Spirit Drifters.
Dinosaurs. That's my new. You've given me the next storyline is going to be something to do with. Yeah.
Do it, man. Yeah.
Well, cool. I mean, thank you again very much for taking the time to talk to me and reading the books. It's a lot of fun to be able to talk about this stuff, and yeah, I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. I mean, like I said, I've kind of known about you for a little while because of the Negatives, and you reached out to me, but I never would have thought to reach out to you because I was like, I think he makes like a lot of really popular books and stuff. So I was like, he's probably like way above my reach here, and so I feel very like honored and privileged that you chose to come talk to me, and that I get to put out an episode because I really like your work. Like we pointed out, I know a lot of that creative circle, and everybody in that circle is doing so many amazing things that, like, what do they say? A rising tide raises all ships, man. So I see bright things in your future, but I feel really special to have got to talk to you.
Well, I feel likewise, and yeah, I have purposely tied myself to all of their writers. I was shamelessly telling them, like, when you all become famous comic book creators, you can then let me in somehow. So we'll see how that goes.
Hey man, everybody finds a door.